you like to sit down?
Okay.
Well, one of the great privileges of these meetings is to have the opportunity to meet with the head of the International Monetary Fund, someone who is renowned in this city and indeed throughout the world. And I think you know of her background, so I will not go into it other than to say that the preparation that she did with the French government and in the legal profession has certainly made her not only a well-prepared but a remarkable leader for the International Monetary Fund, and we're very grateful to you for the leadership that you give. I'd like to ask just 3 questions, and then if there's time we can see if there's room for other questions. But the first one is, the fund is turning 70 this year, and you must have given some reflection inside the fund about what has been the triumphs, what has been the problems over that 70 years. Do you have any comments that you could make on your 70th birthday? The fund's 70th.
Well, Jim, I'm sure you will not challenge me when I say that at 70 you are juvenile, right? Okay. And I think in many ways that's what the fund is like at the moment. We had a few celebrations over the last few weeks to sort of look back and take stock of, you know, what have we done, what have we learned, how can we improve? And it's quite amazing, actually, when you read all the books that have just recently been produced, when you reflect on why, how it was funded and for what purpose, to see that it has had this enduring set of principles which are really anchored around stability, the pursuit of prosperity by its membership, and how the governance that was put in place by the founding fathers has actually kept the fund alive and kicking. Because we have changed over the course of time, and from being that sort of referee of currencies in the early days, our role has significantly evolved on the monetary scene. Our programs, for those that are familiar with the fund's programs, have also significantly changed over the course of time. They're no longer the laundry list that they used to be. They don't have the structural adjustments as they used to be called. And they try to leave more space for a partnership with the countries under program. I think there is a lot more attention paid now to social safety nets, to the issue of protection of the most vulnerable in the populations. And while continuing to be focused on our core mission, which is embedded in Article 1 of the Articles of the IMF, we have, I believe, enlarged our focal so that while only looking at what is macro-critical, we look at things like the fiscal policies applicable in relation to climate change. We look at growth and the job market and how it matters to open up the job market to women in countries like Japan and Korea. How persistent and rising inequality can have an impact on the pursuit of sustainable growth. Now, all those themes would not have been on the table 20, 30 years ago. And that only goes to show that the institution is capable, within its governance, within its mandate, with the articles not very deeply changed over the course of the last 70 years, to actually embrace new issues, new challenges, while continuing to be focused on what is our core business, which is to assess the macro-criticality of certain components of our societies. Now, one thing that I would like to just point out, which has been in development over the course of the last few years, when I look at our areas of involvement, surveillance, bilateral, multilateral, and the cross-section between the two and how they feed each other, lending, and capacity building, of the three, the one that is progressing most and which really is embracing almost the entire membership, is capacity building. We're providing technical assistance and capacity building to more than 80% of our membership. And it's growing, which raises the issue of its funding, because it's partly funded internally, about 50% of it, partly funded by external donors who are generous and have a vested interest in the technical assistance being provided by us. But that's both a strength and a vulnerability when your fastest growing line of business is 50% funded by external players. Voila, a few words.
And when you talk about capacity building, is that significantly or largely or at all in Africa?
Oh, no. 80% is, I'm talking about, of the 188 members, 80% of the 188 members are clients of our capacity building services. So it goes way beyond Africa. You know, we are providing tax and VAT assistance to Egypt at the moment. We were providing a lot of currency realignment to Myanmar a few months ago. And we're providing a lot of public finance management to many countries around the world. If I may, Jim, I would like to signal one thing, which is an interesting development, and how far it will take us and how efficient it is, I think future will tell. But we have joined the platform managed by the 13 most powerful and probably well-endowed educational institutions in the world, many of which are in this country, to actually provide mass online educational services. And we're very pleased to have, at the moment, 2,000 graduates from 3 courses that we've launched. One is public finance management, sort of level 1, if you will. The second is debt sustainability analysis. And the third one is subsidies reform, how to go about it. And in these 3 categories, we have as our graduates and those who intended to but have not yet reached that stage, many civil servants, many people whose government cannot afford to send them to Washington or to get them to be educated in those fields. So this is a really recent development. It's been on for about a year, and together with MIT, Harvard, or Georgetown University, we are assessing and reassessing regularly the efficiency of this process. But I hope it's going to expand the understanding and the knowledge that some people need very much.
And using technology has been a great help to that for you, because you can spread. And certainly you're building a great reputation in that, so I hope.
You know, I was complaining with the team because we had something like more than 50,000 who had registered.
Right.
And I said, only 2,000 graduated. They said, it's okay, because it's 2,000 more than what would have happened otherwise. And the very good education institutions that I just mentioned are experimenting exactly the same dropout proportions.
Exactly right. Could I switch just for a minute, given your limited time, and ask you to comment on the Middle East at the moment, given the importance of that both as a source of funding initially and now a user of funding, and the extent to which this is impacting the fund?
Well, the Middle East is an area where we have been engaged extensively over the last few years, particularly on what we have called the Arab countries in transition. So we have 4 programs underway at the moment, one with Morocco, one with Tunisia, one with Yemen, and one with Jordan. And they're doing reasonably well. Yemen, it's a very recent commitment that we made, but the other 3 are going reasonably well. Morocco probably better than the others. And significant changes have taken place. Fossil fuel subsidy have been reformed and gradually removed, and the fiscal position of countries like Tunisia is hopefully going to improve even better after the elections that are coming up. But we are now engaged beyond these Arab countries in transition, and that's a bit of the issue that we have at the moment, is that, you know, in addition to them, those countries that have not gone through transition are in a dire situation. And when I look at Libya, at Lebanon, at obviously Syria, Iraq, and quite a few others, there are great needs. Libya was a country, for instance, that was, I believe, last year our highest consumer of technical assistance, and yet it's an extremely complicated and confused situation on the ground. So it's a part of the world where we are trying to provide what we can in terms of either lending or technical assistance, where the financing needs are very large, where most of the financing is provided by the neighboring countries, clearly the GCC countries, amongst which Saudi Arabia and Qatar, for instance, although at different pace, different destinations are trying to help very much. That has been the case with Egypt in particular. But where the needs are colossal, and engagement will continue in that part of the world, for sure. There's still a lot more to be done.
But are you being drawn into the nascent and in some cases already visible political issues that are emerging, the Sunni Shia issue, the issues with Iran, the internal governance issues throughout the region? Do you get drawn into that?
We try to avoid that because, typically we can be most efficient if we have global political endorsement in the country. We have, for the first time in quite a few years, done an Article 4 on Iran. So Iran has reinitiated the relationship, and we've been able to, go under the skin of the Iranian economy to understand exactly what the situation was. So that's heading in the right direction. I would say that the relationship with Egypt, which was a little bit complicated for almost a year, is getting much more stable. And we've had mission visits, we've provided technical assistance. Hopefully we'll be able to do another Article 4, which is now quite overdue with Egypt. So there are some positive signs, but we try to avoid the nest of political thorny issues as much as we can.
And the other big issue which is emerging, or could be a big issue, is the question of Ebola.
Yeah.
Do you have a view on that? Is there preparation for that very difficult issue?
What we did as quickly as we could, and staff came back from their vacation in the summer, the board was completely unified, and we approved an emergency financing special program for the three countries of $130 million, which was at the time about 30% of their financing needs. It has risen since, of course. But the beauty of the IMF is that once it had been decided by the board, cash was in the bank in the next 4 days. We disbursed right away, and money was there in order for those countries to face reduced revenues, additional spending needs, and the urgency of people who had to be put back to work to help with the health and humanitarian crisis that the three countries were facing. Just to mention, en passant, the three countries were and are under program with the IMF. So they were very fragile Western African countries that on the top of it are being hampered in their development and in their effort to stabilize their situation by this terrible epidemic. A country like Sierra Leone was cruising at 11% growth rate. That is going to go down to, I don't know, 3-4% probably. It's very difficult to do hypotheticals because much is going to depend on how it's contained and how fast it is contained. But even if it is contained to those three countries, it will reduce their growth, it will induce economic decline, and it will be a brake on the developments that they had initiated. If it is not contained, then it's a much more serious and broader situation.
Very much so. And do you have time for one or two questions from the audience, or are you?
One or two. Two.
Good. I don't know your name. What is it?
Neither do I, actually.
Thank you again, Jim, for doing this, and Christine for taking the time, and your very interesting comments, and I read very carefully your remarks at Georgetown. Specifically, could you comment on how you see the Ukraine, because the original program was supposed to be somewhere in the order of $17 billion, but things have gotten worse, and the IMF will obviously be the key component along with the EU in bringing Ukraine back. Thank you.
You're right that the initial program that was negotiated with the Ukrainian authorities back in April was $17.1 billion. And that was predicated on the hostilities in the east of Ukraine stopping in the early autumn. Now, can we say that the hostilities have stopped? We can say that there is a ceasefire. Can we say that from an economic point of view and from a fiscal point of view the situation has been restored? No. You have about 20% of the countries that is not paying revenue into the state of Ukraine, and you definitely have military spending that is way north of what was envisaged back in April. So in our mind, when we do the combined next two reviews in December, we'll have to reassess the parameters and the hypotheticals that we had when we designed initially in April. And in my mind, additional funding will have to come. Now, with the IMF, on the Ukrainian program, Ukraine is already at 800% of quota, which is huge. So to assume that the additional funding will have to come from the IMF, I think is a bit far-fetched. And if the economy has to be restored and stability maintained, money will have to come from multiple sources. We will be holding hand with the Ukrainian authorities, because what we have seen clearly is a significant change of approach from authorities that were, let's say, a bit casual and complacent about delivering under the program. We have authorities at present that are very much determined to stay on track, to do what is needed, to reform and to replace this old governance by new governance. I think it will take time, but there is a different impetus on the ground.
One more question only.
Can I beg the audience? Please.
Yeah.
Not for a question. I would like to thank you, because you really mobilized your resources, your influence and your access in order to promote and support the ratification by the US Congress of the IMF governance and quota reform. And I would like to thank you personally, Jim, for that, because together with your colleagues and friends, you really moved Earth to actually help achieve that. It's not been achieved. And although I hear what Jack Lew has said, and I have full trust in his determination, although I know that President Obama is very keen to deliver on that, and I'm sure that his G20 partners will remind him of that necessity in Brisbane, we are still, I feel like, a bit of a bargaining toy between various, people who actually believe that the IMF is okay. But it's a different story. It's above my floor. And I hope you can help. I have threatened of even doing belly dancing, if that's what it takes. And I will deliver. But I wish it delivered.
Well, we will look forward to that next year at this meeting. But before we get to next year, I think it's appropriate for us to say, because we don't say it often enough, is what a remarkable job you've done in the fund. It is true. You've stood up for the principles that you believe in. You've been remarkably independent. And I think all of us here, and the fact that you have such a large turnout at noon, is a reflection of the fact that You're both much admired and much appreciated, and certainly for my part, I believe that in spades, and I wish we could, as Christine leaves, we could just tell her how much we love her.
Thank you. Thank you so much.